Today I'm going to be making some new windows for my shed. The windows that are in it are old, they're tired, the glass is slipping out of them, the glazing has let go, so I just need to make some new windows. I'm going to be using some 1x6 material. I'm going to cut all this down to rough length. I'm not going to cut it to final length just yet. Then I'm going to run it through the table saw down to 4 inches, and then I'm going to figure out my lap joints on the edges and get this thing going. We're going to be using some dado blades, and we're just going to assemble a very nice shed window. Hi everybody, I'm Jim Dirdorf and this is Detroit DIY. Let's start making some windows. The windows I'm going to be making are going to be 52.5 inches long by 18.75 of an inch tall. I'm going to put 3 dividers in these so that I wind up with 4 panes of glass. I'll get the glass cut at Ace Hardware. It'll just be a thin glass, but it'll be just fine for a shed window. It doesn't need to be thermal, it's not heated, it doesn't need to be anything else, so we'll be in good shape there. I'm going to go ahead and get these cut to rough length, and then we'll get them through the table saw. So I'm going to leave them about 2 inches long. I know that the bottom board or the side board will wind up shorter. I just want to do some test lap cuts with dado blades and make sure that I have my head wrapped around the dimensions completely before I cut these to final length. I have all my material cut down to its rough length. Now I'm going to go ahead and pass it through the table saw. I've got my feather block installed, I've got my push block, and what I'm going to do is take a 1/2 inch off of one side, and then I'm going to flip it over and take the remainder off of the other side. That way I know I have good square edges. So I'm just going to put a little X right here on the side I'm going to pass through first, so there's no confusion and I make sure I get both sides. I've passed everything through the table saw and taken off a 1/2 inch on one side. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring it to its 4-inch dimensions. And this is the X that I use, so I have no confusion. I know what side to run through the saw. I've readjusted my feather board, and I've got my outfeed roller for the longer pieces set up out there. We'll show you that in a second. Now that I have all my boards ripped down to 4 inches, I'm going to go ahead and get a 3/8 inch dado stack in here and start cutting my lap joints. I'm a little concerned about it because some of the boards have a little bit of cupping. I'm going to see how it goes. It doesn't matter that they're perfect, I just want a good strong joint. I also just want to mention, for those of you that would like to learn more about a table saw, I have some table saw tutorials, some safety tutorials. I'm going to go ahead and put that at the end of this video. I'll put up that whole playlist for you to click on and go through. Building a feather board, a sacrificial fence, all kinds of good stuff to help keep you safe, get good clean cuts, and make really good use of your table saw. Also in there is the use of the dado blades, how to set them up and how to use them, and it's just a good guide. Let's get these dado blades in. So in my instructions here, to get 3/8 of an inch, I need my inside, my outside blade, and one chipper. So, and we have 4 different size chippers here. I'm going to be using 1/8 inch chipper. So we'll get that out. And then we're also going to need some shims. We'll go ahead and run through the setup really quick on how to get these in there. With the saw unplugged, I'm going to go ahead and raise this blade all the way up to gain the most amount of access. I'm going to remove my riving knife. We will not be using that. With the dado stack, we're going to leave that unlocked for a minute so we can get the blade out. In fact, with the dado blades, I believe that I need to leave this in the unlocked position. Now we're going to install our inside blade, teeth always facing toward you. We'll just slip that on there. We're going to put one shim. There's two different size shims in your dado set, and you use those for fine tuning. For this particular application, I do not need to fine tune this because I'm not running against my fence. So I'll be able to adjust it with my miter gauge and a stop block exactly where I want this cut to be. So we'll get this chipper in. The chipper needs to be set up so that the tooth of it is in a gully in the blade itself, not up against the side of it. Away from the other carbide is the most important. If you're using multiple chippers, they would need to be 90 degrees apart. Now we're going to go ahead and put our other shim and our outside blade. And we're going to offset those teeth the same and make sure that we're not touching anywhere. For some reason my carbide is touching the edge of my chipper, which is not ideal. So I'm going to slip this back off. And I am going to use the 2 heavier shims here instead of the lighter ones. Okay, with the heavier shims we're going to go again. I believe these shims are 60 thousandths and the ones that I just took out are 30. That appears to have moved me away just a little bit. I like that better. That looks a lot better to me. Get this tightened up. As we tighten it, we want to make sure that none of our carbides are contacting. If the carbides are contacting, what will happen is it'll make the blade lean. so that it doesn't give you a clean cut, and the blade will wobble while it's cutting and it just won't be a good clean dado at all. Now with our dado stack tightened, we just want to check the other side and make sure we're good. And we are. We have plenty of clearance, so I am pretty happy with that. Now at this point in time, there's really not enough room for me to move this latch back into place. But it's okay because the dado set will be so low that this latch will have no opportunity to contact your throat plate. So let's lower these back down and get our throat plate back in. For the dado stacks, I've made my own throat plate. It just sits in here very nicely, and that'll work just fine for us. The slot in this throat plate is not enough. Now I'm going to go ahead and get my height set and get my width and make a couple of test passes and see what we got. I have my combination square set up at 3/8 of an inch, and what I want to do is just come down on top of my throat plate and make sure that my blade at its highest point is at 3/8 of an inch. The material I'm using is actually 11/16, so it's a little bit shy of 3/4, so I'm going to leave my blade for my first test pass just a little bit shy of the 3/8. I'm going to raise her up just a little bit. I like that. Now I'm going to be using my miter gauge with a board attached to it to cut these dados. You never use your miter gauge and your fence in conjunction with each other. You can use a stop block against your fence. That way once you start to feed through, the stop block stays in place and the edge of the material is not touching your fence. So that's what I want to do now, is bring my fence in and get it adjusted to the 3/8 of an inch, just like that, and lock it down. Now the stop block will come back here. My miter gauge will go here. Now the next thing I want to do is just take my combination square, just flush it out, and come in here and make sure that I am square with the blade. That looks really good. I'm at 0, so I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and make a couple test passes and see how they fit together. I like to pass through 2 times to try and get the cleanest dado that I can. If you have any material left like this that didn't get cleaned off, just take some sandpaper and clean that off. Now that both boards have been passed through, we can fit them together. And as you can see, there's a little inconsistency here. So it looks like the height of my blade is pretty doggone good. However, the fence was just a little bit too far away. So I'm going to cut these off, and I'm going to go ahead and make another test pass until I get this just right before I start putting my pieces through for the window. After a few minutes of tweaking, I got my dado stack set up perfect. And what's going to happen is kind of like what I thought. When this is all assembled, because of the lap joint, my bottom board is going to grow by 3/4 of an inch. So I needed to remove an extra 3/4 of an inch from that board so that when the side pieces come on, they're going to add that back. So my side pieces are going to be cut to their exact length, and my top and bottom is going to be cut 3/4 of an inch shorter. So I'm going to go ahead and get these cut down and get the lap joints in them. What I want to do first is just square up both ends. Even though I've already cut one end and it should be square, there's enough here for me to trim just a little bit off of both ends. This way I know they're nice and square. And then the other thing you want to make sure of is that both boards are the exact same length. So I'll be marking these out and setting them up in pairs. I'm building 2 windows. We will just be featuring one. We'll take a look at both of them when they're done, but we'll just be featuring basically one build. $18 3/4. Now I want to bring these two back together, set them together, line them up, and make sure that they are of identical length. This one is slightly longer. I'm going to go ahead and give it a little trim off. A little too much. That is good. I'm gonna go ahead and get the dados in these. I've got this sitting together on the floor just so I can double check my dimensions before I go on any further with the second window. I see no reason why I wouldn't be good. 52.5, exactly what I'm looking for. 52.5 and 18 3/4. Exactly what I'm looking for. We're good. I'm going to go ahead and get the other window cut, and then we'll come back and start getting assembled. With all my lap joints completed, I've got everything sanded and I'm ready to get these assembled. I'm going to be using some Titebond 3 Ultimate Wood Glue, interior, exterior, and a couple of 1 1/4 inch pin nails. Then I'll get some clamps on here. I'm also going to clamp these in. I've made these several years ago. They're nice and square, so once I get everything nailed, glued, I'll clamp them in. And then I might put some bar clamps on here even, just to kind of squeeze everything together nice and tight. So let's get some glue on these. I'm going to be kind of liberal with it. Make sure I cover all the surfaces. Get in here and rub it around a little bit. Anything I pull off, I'll just bring over here. And we'll go ahead and get them sitting together. I've got some tape here on my bench so I don't accidentally glue it to my bench. I'm going to get these pulled together real nice and get a couple of pin nails in there. The pin nails I'm going to put in on a very slight angle here just to help kind of pull it tight. They're 1 1/4 inch pin nails and they'll hold that nicely. I'm going to go ahead and clean up any squeeze out that I might have right now. The same thing here. Make sure we have that pressed together good. Get a couple of pin nails in it. Clean off our excess. Now we're going to go ahead and get these clamped in. Now I don't want to put a ton of pressure on it at this point in time. We're not looking bad right here the way it is. I like that, it's looking good. Now just for good measure, I'm going to put this bar clamp here and just give it a real good squeeze. Now we're going to flip it around and do the other side. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing here. This time I'll be gluing both sides at once. Get this set in there. Get it pushed in where we want it. 2 pin nails. Go ahead and get a bar clamp on here. Clean off any excess. It's a whole lot easier to do it now than it is to try and sand it out of there. Now I just want to double check everything for square. If we're good, we're going to let her dry. All the glue is dry on the frame and I'm ready to move on to the next step. I've already added one piece here and I'm going to show you how I did that on this next piece right here and exactly what it's for. This isn't completely necessary, but I wanted to give the frame more structure and this is going to do it. Not only that, but I'm going to be installing muntins, 3 of them, to divide this up into 4 panes of glass. And when them go in, they'll go in between notches that I've cut in here and will also help to support this frame and make it a whole lot stronger, and it's going to divide it up into 4 panes of glass. So let's get this bottom piece made and get these muntins installed. When I ripped down this material through the table saw, I ripped down 4 additional pieces just for this. So I want to get a measurement from the inside of both sides, which is 51 inches. Now I'm going to take one of those pieces and get that cut, and we'll get it set in here, a little test fit, make sure it's tight and it's nice, and then we'll mark it out for our cutouts. I have this cut to 51 inches and now I just want to do a test fit here and make sure that we're nice and snug. And we are. That is going to be a very nice tight fit. I am very happy with that. Now we'll go ahead and get it laid out and get our notches cut out in it for the muntins. The total length is 51 inches, so our center is 25.5. Now I want to take this 25.5 and I want to divide that in half to mark my next spot. So with 25.5 divided in half is 12 3/4. We're going to go ahead and get us a mark there, and the same thing on the other side. I'm just going to go ahead and draw a reference line right across the board. I don't need to go the whole way. Also, when I test fit this, I noticed that it has a slight crown in it. So I want to make sure that I cut my notches on the correct side, because that board also has a slight crown in it, so that they'll sit together nicely. I've set my combination square at 2.5 inches. That's how far I want my muntins to sit into this piece of wood. So I'm just going to take my pencil and I'm just going to slide them together and mark that line. Better than that. Sticker's gotta go. So that's going to mark out how deep we want to cut this out. This will be my outside reveal, and we'll see what that's going to look like here in a little bit. I want to mark this at 3/8 of an inch so that I can center it on this line and go ahead and just draw a line on the outside edge. So with this muntin marked right in the center, I'm just going to line it up right on my line, and I'm going to put me 2 little lines right next to it on each side, and then I will use my speed square to get them marked out. With all 3 of these marked out, I'm going to just use my jigsaw and cut these out. They don't have to be perfect. Everything's going to get glued and nailed, and then once the trim goes on, there'll be a very small reveal. There'll be caulking, so I'm not worried if these are slightly loose. You don't need to be able to have to hammer them in. In fact, I don't really want to. I want them slightly loose. I don't want them real sloppy, but I want them a little bit loose. So what I'm doing is just working an opening with my saw blade so that I will have room to fit it in here like this. It needs just a little bit more and then it'll fit in there no problem. So it should look just like that. Now my blade will fit in there no problem and cut the remainder of this out. And there we have it. I'll get these other two cut and then we'll get this thing sitting in there. With all three of them cut, now I want to go ahead and just do a little test fit, make sure we're flush and that everything looks good here. See what I mean by I want them just a little bit loose. And what that's going to do is give me a little ability to square these up really nice if they don't sit in there already square. I have my bottom piece setting in place, but it's not attached yet. We're not going to attach it just yet. I want to go ahead and cut my other two muntins, and to get a good accurate measurement for that you need to measure right here on the outside edge of the window, and because they're inset we want to go to our top one by down to our bottom, which is 17 1/4 inches. I'm going to get two more of them cut and then we will be ready to start getting this in place. With my muntins cut I want to go ahead and sand off any tear out. And then I just want to soften the corners. I don't want to round them out big time, I just want to soften the corners. I want to take my pencil and just mark out the notches for the muntins. So when I glue this, I'm going to glue this piece down that I don't put any glue here. I'll do that when I put the muntins in shortly after this piece gets glued. Now I just want to test fit everything and check it for square and see how everything looks. So with my speed square, I'm just going to come in here and just check everything. We look really good. We look good. About a 32nd of an inch. We look really good. So I'm going to continue to do that and then we'll be ready to glue it together. All the muntins are really square. I'm really happy with what I've got here, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to slide them back out and we are going to glue this piece in. I want to be liberal with the glue. I want a lot of glue in here. I'm going to stay a little bit away from the edges, stay a little bit away from these notch outs. Okay, we are going to get this set back in here, get it lined up real nice. Now I have to say I've selected this side to be my face. So I want to kind of be conscious of what I've got going on there, so that when I put my trim on, I've got a nice flush surface for my trim. I'm going to put 2 nails in this, maybe a couple right here, just to kind of hold everything right where I want it. And then we're going to go ahead and get these stiles in and get everything clamped. I'm using 1 1/4 inch pin nails, and I just want to shoot them in on a slight angle. I'm going to put 2 down here. I'm all nice and flush. Check everything down here. I'm good. 2 more in. Now I just kind of want to get a nice flush face out here. I'm happy with that for right this second. Same thing here, I want to be liberal with the glue. Spread it around with my finger. Any squeeze out, I'll clean up right here in a few minutes. Get this one in. With them in place, I'm going to switch out to a 2-inch nail. I'm going to chuck them for square and pin them right through the bottom. With those pinned in, I want to do the exact same thing up here. Now I've switched back to my 1 1/4 inch nails. I'm going to finish nailing this plate. Now I'm just going to take some rags and clean up my glue. There's getting ready to be more because I'm going to put a bunch of clamps on here while we're going, just to make sure that it's pulled in real nice and tight. Any excess squeeze out that I can't get now, I will just sand it off. It sands off fairly easy, and most of it's not going to be in my way either or be seen, but some of it will. Now that I have it all clamped, nailed, glued, we're going to set it to the side and let this dry overnight, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Now that the framework's finished, the muntins are in, everything is glued up, I need to build the framework that the glass is going to sit up against. What I've done is I've taken the cutoffs from these 1x6s. I cut these down to 4 in the table saw for the size of my frame, and I had these strips left. They were 1 inch by 3/4 of an inch basically. I ripped them down to 3/4 of an inch, and then I set my blade at 30 degrees and I ran it through and put a nice little angle on them. I was going to use 1/4 round for this, and it probably would have been faster than cutting all this down and doing what I did, but it was a lot more money. Right now 1/4 round is just beyond ridiculous. I couldn't pay $11 for an 8-foot piece of 1/4 round that was crap. So this is how I did it, and I've got one in here. I'm going to flip this around and we'll take a look at it, and then I'm going to continue on. Everything is just a 45-degree cut. I think this is going to look really nice. In fact, I think I'll like it better than the 1/4 round. So this is what we have right here, and I think I am really going to like this. I'm not certain that I'm going to nail them. I think I'm just going to glue them. Right now they're just sitting there, and I'm going to continue on making the rest of them, but I really like how that looks. I've got these all ready to go. I've got everything cut to 3/4 by 3/4. You can kind of see the profile here a little bit better, and like I say, that is a 30-degree angle, and I really like what I got there. Once I get these in, I'll sand them lightly and just kind of soften the edges, but I really like the look of that, and I'm glad I left this reveal. I think I'll really like that too. So I'm going to get some more of these cut down and fit in, and we'll take a look at it here in a little bit. I'm marking these a little bit long because I want to sneak up on it. I want a really tight fit for these pieces of trim. I want them to basically hold themselves in place. And the only way I'm going to get that is with a tight fit. It also makes a nice, tight, clean corner when you get them fitting really tight together. So this may take multiple trips to the saw, 3 or 4 trips. I've left it about 1/8 of an inch too long. Just going to look at it, and then I'll just take about 1/4 of a blade until I get a tight fit. I have this bottom one fitting. I need to touch it up a little bit with the sandpaper. It's snug. It's not super tight, but it's snug, and I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to go ahead and start getting my other pieces cut out, and the same thing, I want them all tight fits. I have all 4 of my window openings trimmed out now. I'm really happy with how they turned out. I think this window is going to look excellent, maybe more than a shed deserves, but they turned out really good. I'm going to get them glued in. I'm just going to put some clamps in the middle right here to give them a squeeze. Maybe a clamps at the bottom. Everything is fitting pretty tight. I could maybe get away without clamping anything, but I still want to get some clamps on it. This is the last one that I have to glue, so we'll just get her glued in there real quick. I'm going to set my pieces up here on top so that everything goes back exactly where it was. I drew a line on the inside so that I could see my glue seam, and I just want to put a nice little straight bead right across that. And I'll go ahead and get this one setting in. Any squeeze out, I'll clean up in a minute. Now this piece, I just want to put a bead of glue down this side. Just like that. And we'll get that one snapped in right here. Alright, now we're going to get this one in. Same thing, a little bead of glue. Get it snapped into place. And then the top one, same thing. Little bead of glue. Then I'm going to start it in on this side and pull this one out some so that I can set them together and push them in together. Just like that. Now I'm going to just go through and get everything lined up before this glue grabs a hold, because it grabs pretty quick. That feels really good. I'm going to get my excess wiped off. Make sure you check inside and get that wiped off. There we go. I'm going to let this dry overnight, and then I'll be ready to start putting the face trim on. I'll get the glass ordered, and this thing's going to get wrapped up here pretty quick. Both of my window frames are at the same stage of being built. This is the one that I've been showcasing. All of my glue is dry, everything's good, and I'm ready for the next step. This is the other frame that I've been building. I know I said they would be the same size, but I've decided to make this one slightly smaller. Just for aesthetic purposes, my trim will look better. Everything will look better. That'll be an up and coming video when these get installed, but we're ready for the next step. What I want to do now is sand the face of the frames front and back on both windows. I'm going to be using my orbital sander, and I have some 150 grit on here, and I just want to get any glue off and anything else off, because I'm going to trim these windows now as opposed to after they're installed. So the trim will help me to get them into place and also to install them. I have my entire face sanded and I'm ready to start putting my trim on. And I want to work from this inside corner. As you can see, if I was to work from this outside corner, my trim would wind up here and it would be overhanging my window opening, and that is not what we want. So we want to start right here and let that be the representation of where the trim is going to lay. I'm going to go ahead and get this first piece cut, and I'll be cutting 45s on this. I have my trim all cut, and because we were careful and we made sure that this frame was square as we built it, all of my cuts are 45 degrees. All of my trim cuts in here to hold my glass into place is 45 degrees. Everything is 45 degrees. Because of the cupping of the wood, I've struggled a little bit to get nice tight miters. They're tight on the bottom, but they're not tight on the top. There's a little gap, but that's okay. I'll caulk that in. What I want to do now is go ahead and glue and nail this on. I'm going to be using 2-inch pin nails and then just some good glue. Once that's all set and dry, then I'll get my wood putty in and start sanding. I'm using my combination square just as a reference. I've got it set at 1.5 inches. I have 1.5 inches of material right here to put nails in. So I just want to give myself a reference line. Just makes life a little bit easier, helps me shoot the nails a little bit straighter, and I don't have anything poking out the side. So I just want to do the same thing I did when I was laying out for the muntins, is go ahead and describe this line. I've left this piece clamped in place just for a guide for this edge when I get this back on here, and re-clamp it before I nail it. Now I just want to get a liberal amount of glue on here to hold this in place. I'm going to stay away from this edge just a little bit so that I don't accidentally glue that one before I'm ready. Now we'll get this set back into place, clamp it. When you're clamping wet glue like this, you have to be careful because it's slippery and it'll try to slide around, so you want to double check things as you come back to it. Now I just want to test fit this piece and make sure that my alignments are good. I like that. Alright, let's get some nails in it. About every 8 inches or so, I'm going to put a nail. Now we're going to go ahead and get any excess glue wiped off. Now we're going to go ahead and do the same thing here. The only difference being I am going to set my combination square at 3/4 of an inch. and scribe this line. Get us a nice bead of glue. Now before I nail this, I just want to check my fit, make sure we are looking good. I like it. Let's get it nailed. I like it. Let's get it nailed. Now I'm just going to continue on and do the same thing until we get her all nailed on. Now that everything's nailed and glued, I have a little bit of misalignment on my corners, which is expected. So what I want to do is drive a pin up through the bottom and the top of all four corners to hold these into place. So I just want to take my 2-inch nail and go where I'm about halfway through into the piece of material that I'm nailing. Just draw me a little line for a reference as to where to shoot that nail. Now what I want to do is use these locking pliers. They're from Craig Jig. You can get channel locks and other sorts of manufacturers vice grip that also have these feet on them, referred to as welder's pliers or something like that. And just clamp this together so that it's a nice feeling fit before I shoot my nail in. Now using the reference line and making sure that my nail gun is parallel so that my nail doesn't stick out on either side. I'm going to shoot that nail in there. Now that is pinned into place. Stayed very nicely. I'm going to go ahead and do all four corners. Now that everything is nailed, pinned, clamps are off, I'm going to go ahead and use some plastic wood, and I'm going to fill in all these nail holes and let that dry so we can start sanding. You don't need a lot, you just need to get that nail hole filled in. Now it's time to start sanding. I'm going to sand the face of this first, and I'm going to sand it thoroughly. And I'm going to do that with 80 grit sandpaper on my oscillating sander. Then I'm going to switch down to some 120. Then everything inside here will all be sanded by hand. Oh yeah. keep sanding. The sanding is complete. I've got it all blown off, and now I'm going to caulk it. I'm going to be using a DAP painter's caulk. It's for paint projects. It's a 50-year caulk. And what I want to do is just go through and close up any of the gaps that I see. Just get it sealed up real nice. Let's get started. I've cut the tip of my caulk tube very thin so that the hole is very small. It'll lay out a small bead of caulk. That's all I need in most cases. The first thing I want to do is caulk this seam right here. Whether there's gaps or not, I want to caulk this seam in case any moisture gets behind this trim work. This will be sealed and the water won't be able to get in between. And I just want to put a super thin bead the full length of this. It's important that you don't get too carried away and caulk too much, because this skims over really fast. So you just want to work in sections. I'm going to use this tool that you can find in any painter section, and I'm going to just press this caulk in here real nice, get it cleaned up. And there you have it. That's what we pulled out, our excess. It's quite a bit in all realities. The next area I want to address is right here. For that, we're going to be using a spatula. You can also find these in the big box stores. They're used for spreading auto body putty, stuff like that. And I want to get me a nice little bead right here, including down the outside edge, just a little bit. Now we're going to take this guy and we're just going to press it in there, clean off any excess. That is exactly what I want. My next area of concern is right here and on these inside edges. So let's get this one first. Same thing here. I'm just going to pull that off to where I get just a super thin layer, and that's all that's needed. I can blend it with my finger a little bit, and there we go. So for here, it's going to be typically the same thing. I'm just going to put a real light bead in. I'm going to do the same thing over here. Then I'm going to use this very corner, and I'm just going to come through and clean it up so that that is what I have left. Very nice. Alright, I'm going to keep caulking and we'll come back and have a look when it's finished. The back side is finished, and this is exactly what we're looking for. Just nice, clean, no humps, no bumps. Everything is in there extremely nice. Now we're going to get started on the front side. On the front side, just the same as the back, this is areas of concern. So we're going to go ahead and get some caulk on here. And I'm going to run right up through here at the same time. I want to make sure I work this in here really good. Always keep your spatula cleaned off. Don't let any caulk build up on it. Don't let it dry on it. You'll get cleaner edges if you keep that wiped off nice. That looks really good. My next area of concern is all my angles right here. Most of them are really nice and tight, but some of them still have some small gaps that water could come into. So we have a slight gap right here that we want to get filled in, and then we're going to come right down through here and up here. And then it's the same thing. We're just going to be very meticulous, take our time, clean this up really nice. Don't be afraid to get your fingers in there if you need to. I'm happy with that. I'm going to keep going and we'll come back, take a look when it's done. I have finished caulking the front side, all my areas of concern, everything filled in really nice, no complaints, all my little gaps are gone, everything is nice and tight. I'm going to let this dry a little bit and then we are going to get some primer on this. Now that my caulking is cured, I'm ready to get some primer on here. I'm going to be using a primer sealer. You really don't have to prime this. You can use paint and primer in one. It will adhere well to the wood. However, there are benefits to priming it, especially because this is a primer sealer. You can put any top coat over the top of this primer. When you're selecting your primer, you have to be cautious of what top coats can be applied over the top of that particular primer. That's what makes this a very versatile primer. Let's get this stuff on. I'm going to put a link to a video right up above here, to a video that I have on whether to prime or not to prime. It explains a lot about this and about paint and primer in one. This is just going to be a one coat thing. I am not going to put two coats on it. This is high hiding and I just really want the sealing properties more than anything else. So this is going to be a one coat shot. And then the paint will go on. This can be top coated in 1 hour. I'm going to keep going. We'll come back and take a look when it's done. Both of my windows have their primer coat on them. It's kind of light. That's okay. Like I say, it's just the sealing properties that I'm really looking for, meaning I don't want anything to bleed out of this wood through the paint. So they're front and back, they're both caught up. While I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to take some of my cut-offs and other scrap material, and I'm going to run it through the table saw and cut it down to 3/4 of an inch. And then I'll be using that to hold my glass into place. I have got the windows painted. I've got 3 coats of paint on them. I cut my strips. We'll just call these window retainers. I'll show you how I'm going to use them. They're 3/4 by 3/4. I drilled 2 pilot holes in them with a countersink bit so that they wouldn't split. I'm feeling good. I'm excited. We're going to get some glass in. I'm going to stray a little bit from conventional, but we're still going to use a latex glazing on the outside of these. Let me show you what I'm going to do. I have my first piece of glass setting in here, and what I have here is some rubber window seal. This would typically be used under the window where it meets up to the windowsill to seal any drafts from coming in. What I am going to use it for is to hold the glass up a little bit so that I have room for glazing. I strayed from conventional when I put these strips of wood on the front, and I knew that I would need to hold the glass up just a little bit to get the glazing in to seal it, and this is how I intend to do it. This has a double face tape on it, and I'm going to hold it about 1/8 of an inch or so off of the edge, and that'll still give me a good 1/4 inch to get some glazing in there and get it sealed. And this will hold my glass up. This will hold my glass up about 1/4 or a little less. It shouldn't compress it very much, and I'm not going to push down on it when I put my strips in. I'm just going to set them in on the glass, and then I'll glaze the other side. Let's get this in. I've got these cut to length just by using a razor knife. My neighbor's dogs make a lot of noise. Peel the backing off and get it stuck down. I want to hold it about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Give me plenty of room for glazing. There we have it. I've already got this piece in. Now I'm just going to put 2 pieces on either end. Get them fit in. Alright, with those in place, I'm just going to set this glass back in here, right on top of them. Position it where I'm happy with it. Now we'll get our strips set in. And then those will get screwed into place. I'm going to be using 1 1/4 inch number 8 wood screws to hold these into place. And I've drilled the holes in this piece that's going to go on the other side 1 inch lower than these so that my screws don't collide. So each one of these pieces are drilled differently. I only needed 3 of them for this window and 2 for the other one. So that will avoid any collisions of screws. There's not quite enough room to use the driver, but because there's pilot holes, the screws are going in nice and easy. And I don't need to like put them in super tight. They just need to hold these in place. Okay, with them in place, I'm just going to do that 3 more times, and then we'll flip these over and we'll get some glazing in them. I've got all the glass in, and I'm really happy with what I've got here. I've got about 1/4 of an inch between the glass and the wood, which is exactly what I wanted. I know that may be hard to see on the camera, but there is a significant gap right here between the glass and the wood. I'm going to be using this window glazing from DAP. This is a latex window glazing, and this should work out really good. I taped these two. I just want to see how much of a mess there is, because this tip is intended for glazing, and I'm doing things just slightly different than the norm, so I want to see how much of a mess it's going to make on the wood, or basically on this tape, before I move on where there is no tape, or do I tape those off. So let's get some of this in. So I'm not going to get super carried away. I'm going to do 2 sides, then I'm going to work it in with a putty knife, push it in there real nice and tight, and possibly some water with the putty knife, just to make sure I get a smooth surface when I'm finished. Got a little air pocket going on there. There we go. Any of it that gets on the glass, or any extra on the glass, I'm not worried about. That will scrape off easily once this cures. I do want this to be on a slight angle, just to help it repel the water. There we go. So it's far from being perfectly smooth, and I'm sure with some practice that could be better, but I just want to go through and make sure that it's pushed in good. Even if I have to add a little more, I will. I'm just going to come down it like this. Now this is just a dry putty knife at this point in time. I'm pretty happy with that. It's pretty smooth. Maybe I won't be needing any water to I'm pretty happy with that. I'm going to call that good. Do the same thing here. With that done, I'm going to go ahead and glaze these other two sides in and get them smoothed out the exact same way. I'm going to get these pushed in, smoothed out, and then we'll come back, we'll take a look when it's all done. The glazing is finished on these two panes right here, and I want to go ahead and get this tape off of here now. I don't want to let the glazing dry and glue the tape into place. I just wanted to mention that before I moved on and forgot to mention it, because it'll make it nearly impossible to get this tape off if you leave it in place too long. And I really like that it's providing me with almost a seamless looking result here. Alright, I'm going to let it dry, and then I'll come through with a razor blade and scrape off anything that's on the glass, any excess that's on the glass. I'm going to keep moving on. It's been about 24 hours now, and all of my glazing is dry. I just have a nice little scraper here with a sharp razor knife, and just go along, and anything that got on the glass, just peel it right off. Just that easy. If there's any other little residue or you didn't get in close enough, just get in a little closer and get it. I'm going to get this scraped off. We'll stand one of these up and take a look at it. Okay, here it is, all finished, looking good. The next time you see these windows, they'll be getting installed. That's all we got for this time. If you want to watch all the videos of this shed restoration, I've put a playlist on my channel called Shed Restoration. If you'd like to get an amazing shirt like this, I put a link down in the description to our store. We've got t-shirts, sweatshirts, hats, all kinds of cool stuff. I'd greatly appreciate it if you'd check it out. If you haven't subscribed yet, it would be awesome if you would consider doing so. I'd really appreciate it. That's all we got for this time. If you enjoyed yourself, click on one of those two videos that are going to pop up next to me. And remember to always respect the power of your power tool.